Alright, so this is going to be take two because my dumbass didn't make sure my sound input settings were correct before I started recording the video. So basically none of the speech of the first few minutes really came through. I mean, it just has to do with really the way that Windows deals with your input settings, but that's getting off on a tangent. But here, Windows, if I have an input setting and I add a new one, do not change it until I tell you. Alright? Alright. So anyway, I'm gonna, so basically this is the second take of what I like to call contracting and you. And basically the idea of what a managed service provider is, and basically how a lot of technical support works and how indirect it is. So, like, oh, where's my phone? Whatever, I have my ring, like, I should actually go for that 1 minute. Sorry, self-employed, gotta keep my phone at hand's length. Alright. So anyway, like I said, contracting and you. Now, basically, if you received technical support, especially if you work in a retail environment, you may be under the purview of what's called a managed service provider. So basically, before I go on, I have to kind of explain the triumvirate between managed service provider, the customer, and the technician. Now, basically, usually, say you're working at a place and you get a technician sent to you. Now, like, first of all, we're just getting ahead of myself. So basically, we'll talk about what is a managed service provider and what do they do. So basically, a managed service provider is a company that is contracted by another company to provide services for them. That's simply what it is. So say you're a retail company and pretty much one of your point of sales break or you're having network issues. Unless your company directly dispatches and keeps a technical support system, you'll be under what's called a managed service provider. And again, basically the two big things they do is, first of all, actually managing your services. So basically what they do is that they have backdoor access. So basically, say you have a network. So basically, your managed service provider has backdoor access to your network. They can monitor those devices. They can see if something goes up or down. They can see if something new is connected to the network. They can turn off devices or ports or let your traffic through. So basically, that's part of what they do, actually manage your devices. Whether it's logically, i.e. like the logs, the documentation, or physically, which means dispatching a technician to actually perform service at your site. So basically, where that's actually important is where I have to explain the triumvirate. So basically, three legs make up the triumvirate. There's the customer. Basically, it's the company that you work for or you. So basically, there's the customer, there's the company, like I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say anybody I work for because that can burn some bridges. But let's say Geek Squad. So Geek Squad so there's you, the customer, there's the company, and then there's the technician. So basically, the relationship between the company and the technician will be handled one of two ways. Either the technician will be an employee of the company, or they'll be a contractor. So basically, and basically that's how the triumvirate works. So basically, usually the way what we call a service request goes is that there will be something on site that will be an issue that breaks or whatever else has you. So when that happens, the managed service provider is alerted, either through an automatic script in the devices, or someone on site will say, hey, this device went down, or my business is being impacted because we can't get through. We're going to need somebody dispatched. So then at that point, they'll send a technician. So, and basically, in order for anything to be assigned, all three parties have to be available. So basically, if they can't find a technician to be available for the time that the customer needs, nothing's going to happen. If the customer isn't available for the time they can dispatch a technician, nothing's going to happen. If the company closes its doors at certain hours when the company or the technician is available to do something, nothing happens. Basically, if any part of this breaks down, nothing happens. And I know what you're saying. That sounds very inefficient. Yes, it is by design. But that's something we'll get into later, because in some cases that has actually benefited me, but I'll get into it. So basically, again, there's the triumvirate: the managed service provider, the company, and the customer. The managed service provider, company, the customer, and the technician. So basically, when I arrive on site, here's what the basic workflow goes. I'll come to site, and then I'll tell the customer, hey, I'm on site from such and such company to do such and such work. Now again, whenever I get on site, I'm supposed to represent myself as an employee of the managed service provider company, even though I'm not. And sometimes I'll reveal that to the customer, but it's neither here nor there. So basically, I'll come on site and I'll tell the customer, hey, I'm such and such with such and such company. I'm here to do such and such work. And two things will happen. Either A, they'll be expecting me, or they won't. And a lot of times, I'll show up on site, and no one's on site is expecting me to be there. So either A, they have to escalate it up the chain in order to try to figure out who was supposed to be there when, because really the managed service provider could just have given them a phone call and said, hey, by the way, we're going to dispatch this person at this time to take care of your company. But they don't, even though they hound me unendingly in order to make sure that I'm going to be there. But basically, of course, they do that because if I don't show up, then the customer cancels their contract with the company. So again, that's neither here nor there. So once I've shown up on site and told the customer what I'm supposed to be doing, then I'll call in to the company, the managed service provider, and tell them, hey, I'm such and such at such and such site to do such and such work, and to get clarification on the work order. Because, as I like to say, there's what the work order says and what the situation is when I get on site. So basically, sometimes I'll get on site and the customer isn't prepared for me to do work, or the parts haven't arrived on site, or the work order was just wrong. Like straight up, the scope of work that they put on the work order was just wrong. And that happens, and basically when one of those things happened, basically either they try to push through because they already charged the company and paid me for my time, or they're gonna have to abort and then reschedule. Now, let me tell you something, is that for me it makes no never mind, because as long as it's not directly my fault and I can show it's not my fault, I'm gonna get paid. So basically, like, if I get on site and somebody, like a manager doesn't show up and I have to leave, whatever, I still get paid. If the parts aren't there, whatever, I still get paid, and the customer and the MSP has to work out how that's going to be billed. But the bottom line is, I'm going to be paid. So basically, that's how that works. Speaking of which, I'm going to need to do a follow-up call and really kind of lean on somebody, because I've done my due diligence, the MSP didn't do theirs, so it's whatever. Now this, so basically, so that's basically the workflow. I'll get on site, I'll tell the customer I'm there, I'll call into the MSP, and I'll make my attempt to do my work. So basically, now that you see how the system works, you may ask yourself, why do they do that? Why don't they just have somebody whose job it is to go down and take care of things internally within the company? And the easy answer is, it's cheaper. So basically, here's the bottom line of say you have someone that you have to serve this number of stores in this area, and that you need them to be available at any given time to be able to go out and do it. You have to pay them for all that time they're on call, whether they actually do anything that day or not. So basically, say you have in an area 5 stores in a day that needs to be done on this one day. Like, all right, that's great. It's good to have an employee in that situation, because then you can just say, hey, go to these stores and do this. But imagine the next week you have no stores. Well, basically, if you run employees, you have to pay people for those weeks, even though they're not going out and doing runs. So basically, how much do you have to pay? $50, $80, $100,000 a year per person, just to have somebody sit in an office in case something breaks. Now again, in my opinion, you should have that. You should have somebody in all of your service areas on call, so that if something goes down, then they can take care of it. Because let me tell you something, if something goes down on a store and they can't take sales, they will lose thousands, hundreds of thousands, like within a day. Like, I've had stores that are total down and they couldn't take sales, and the amount that they lose is astronomical. But that's neither here nor there. Really, but basically, again, the business isn't set for preparing for any eventuality. It's set for short run in the returns, and in the short run, if you don't need to be paying somebody to perform some service, you just don't, and you don't keep them on the books. You just try to find somebody when you do need them. So basically, say like a service request will go down, like something on site breaks, or needs to be replaced? Well, the first thing you need to do is send that part down to the site, and what some people will do is, and what some companies will do, will actually try to schedule the technician before the parts arrive on site, because because they want to try to make sure that the thing is taken care of as soon as things arrive on site, so that because basically as soon as service is completed, then they can start billing then the MSP can start billing the customer, because I don't bill the customer, I bill the MSP. But anyway, basically, so basically the MSP has to send the parts on site and then dispatch the technician. The technician will come, see if the parts are arrived. If the parts aren't on site, or aren't where we expect them to be, we have to go back to the MSP to get the tracking and to see whether or not the parts arrived on site. And if the parts did arrive on site, then we have to see who on site received them in order to establish chain of custody. And in some cases, that breaks down completely, because supposedly the delivery people should actually have somebody sign for those parts on site, and that the MSP should specify that those parts be signed for. But sometimes they don't, and basically they're just kind of dropped off on site. And again, basically what can happen at this cases is an employee can just stuff those somewhere where they don't know it, or it can be lost or stolen. But again, that's not my purview. Basically, my purview comes once I'm arrived and the parts arrive. Now again, if I arrived and there's an issue with the parts, either the parts are faulty, or they're not on site, or there's a cable or something missing, basically we just have to go back to that first process, send back new parts, and then reschedule it. Because again, there's no depot that I can just go to and get new parts. They all dispatch it, probably from the opposite coast, because again, I'm dispatched out of California, but a lot of the MSPs that I'm working with will be pretty much incorporated out of say Texas, Florida, Georgia, people with places, with super low taxes and very, very poor employment and contracting law. But basically, again, they're incorporated there, but still do business in California, whether or not they're actually in compliance with the local law or not. But again, that's neither here nor there. Really, like I said, technically speaking, really, I should be the one that's should be and I should really mark compliance to the local regulations. But again, that really comes down on the company and the customer, because they're the ones who really told me to be there and do the thing. So, what are you gonna what are you gonna do? Be mad at me because I chose to accept money? No. And even sometimes I'll tell them listen, this is against code. This is unsafe. But basically that's not good enough for the managed service provider, because to them that means they can't bill the customer and collect their money off of my work. So but yeah, that's that's kind of a peek behind the curtain. Now I know what you're I know what you're asking, because I know what you're wondering. The first question that comes to mind is well, if that's the case, wouldn't it be cheaper and easier of us to work with the technician directly? Yes it would. Yes it would. And basically typically Where technicians are limited is capital, i.e., they don't have the facilities, the parts, the money to be the managed service provider. What they do have, what I provide, is the skill. Basically, I'm able to actually go on site and perform the work that needs to be done. But the whole arrangement part, the whole scheduling, all of that, the whole contacts, making contacts, I'm not prepared for. I'm not set up to be able to know when this person needs technical support. Or, I mean, and of course, the best thing I can do is advertise, but really, in my experience, especially when I advertise to home customers, my returns just tend not to be the same. That's why, personally, it behooves me to work with an MSP, and that's simply because like me getting connected to the customers is harder. Now again, because I'm searchable. Like, you can do a Google search and you can find me, but again, like most customers are non-technical, and not only do they not know how to perform the technical services, they don't even know who to call. That which is unfortunate, because again, if they knew, hey, you call me, especially like you live 3 minutes away from where I am, call me. But again, like typically, like especially with corporate customers, they already have a contract with the MSP. So they're more comfortable running everything through that contract because they already have those list of contacts, and they can just figure, something goes down, I just call my MSP and they'll handle it. And basically, again, it's and it is passing the buck. It's very much passing the buck. But I mean, in the business, we refer to it as opportunity costs, i.e., the amount of time I spend trying to find customers would be better spent working. And so basically, if somebody is able to find customers for me, then it behooves me to just work with them and to just so that they can just schedule me and I can just start working. And again, from the customer's perspective, like I said, time that they spend trying to get things fixed, as far as they're concerned, is time they can spend actually doing stuff. Now, of course, like I say, if they don't have their stuff fixed, then then in some cases they can't do what they're supposed to do. So really, getting their stuff fixed should take precedence, and whatever expense that like, for example, right now my alternator's out, which is why I'm able to do this right now. But like, my car's not starting, so basically like it doesn't behoove me to try to schedule jobs or try to work or anything until my car is out of the shop, because nothing else can be done until that first thing is taken care of. And so basically, like, the conclusion is, what are managed service providers? Essentially, they're middlemen. They're basically middlemen in between the customer and the technicians, who pretty much like arrange for work to be done and collect money off of that, off of the introduction, so to speak. Now again, I'm not gonna list any specific companies, but like, if you're a major retailer and if you work with a major retailer, then that's the situation. Like, that's simply what's going down. And so that you can be informed of, basically, again, how this is done. I mean, like I said, it's to pass the buck, both in terms of both financially, i.e., the customer does it because it costs them less in the long run. Basically, that's what it does. It's shaving. A lot of times the customer complains about it, but really in the end the customer does it because it costs them less than having a full-time on-site IT person. And that's simply what it comes down to. Basically, this site doesn't want to pay to have an IT person there full time, so they pretty much work with a managed service company and are only be billed, aside from their, of course, there's whatever subscription fees they incur, only to be billed in the events. Because again, as far as they're concerned, as far as they're concerned, like, it's, again, as far as they're concerned, it's cheaper. It's better to be billed $300 for this single dispatch for this one day than it is to have somebody like have somebody on there full time for 50, 80, $100,000 a year. And really, like I said, if you're a company of any size, really you should be budgeting for that. But I mean, I understand why you wouldn't, because the nature of customers is that they're cost conscious and that they are always willing to compromise on quality of service to get a better price. Always. It never fails. I'm no exception. Basically, like, if I can get something slightly less good for a better price, I'll do it. But then again, I can fix most of the stuff that ends up broken, so that works out for me. I mean, you get what you pay for, and I always keep that in mind. So if I cut rates on something and it breaks, I can't be mad because I knew that. Now, if I bought something premium, if I bought the top of the line and then it fails, then I have the right to be upset. Because this was your best and it wasn't good enough. And I could have gotten something crappier, but I chose not to because I chose to get the best to not have this be an issue. But again, that's neither here nor there. So basically, I mean, and really it comes down to why this happens. Really, it does happen because customers are price conscious. Basically, customers, a lot of times they don't want to pay for if they feel that they didn't receive service or if the service wasn't up to the standards that they expected, regardless of whether that's realistic or not. And again, I understand, as a customer, that's your prerogative. That's your self-interest, is to get paid, is to pay the least amount for the best quality of service. Basically, both the managed service provider and kind of technically me as a technician, our interest is the opposite, is to get paid the most for the least amount of work or least time or the lowest quality of service. And again, like I said, it sounds messed up when I put it into words, but that's the game. That's the game, baby. If you don't like the rules, don't play. I mean, So I'm aware of those rules. So basically, whenever there's some screwiness with with the managed service provider, I have to think of it as like, that's just the way it is. Everyone's trying to cut rates, and in some cases, it actually ends up costing more in the long run because like I said, if something goes wrong on site through no fault of my own, and I have to go back to site, you have to pay me my rate again. Even and for example, at least for the first hour I'm on site. Now, anything after that is fractional. But for the first hour, I get paid for the first hour. So if I'm on site for 10 minutes, realize, oh no, parts didn't arrive on site, we have to abort. You have to pay me for that first hour. Heck, if we're on a fixed rate, you have to pay me the full amount unless you're able to kind of redispatch, and at which point we have to negotiate because again, if I me leaving site and come, because again, the agreement between me and the MSP was this day at this site for this time for this duration of time. So if I have to leave and come back for any reason, we got to renegotiate that unless we negotiated that in the first hand, unless there was a revisit clause. And again, that just comes down to coordination, negotiation, yada yada yada. Me, like I say, I go by the work order. If it's not on the work order in writing, I don't do it. And basically, if anybody has an issue with that, I shove the work order in their face. Because it's like, this is the work order. This is my contract. And whatever you intended, that's immaterial because I have a contract. And these are the terms of my contract. And if you want to adjust the terms, then you have to compensate me in kind. So, and again, I went on a couple of tangents, but basically this is kind of my first long form video, kind of to really, usually I've been putting these on my Facebook feed, but really what I'm going to be doing for this one is posting it to YouTube and to really post it to YouTube and really link it onto my Facebook, because there's the idea of, maybe maybe I can just of course there's the pipe dream of, maybe if I do this enough, I can actually pivot into not actually working and just make a living off of making a video about talking about working. That's the dream, babe. And of course, like I say, that's not to say streamers or influencers or whatever don't work and don't work hard or don't work long hours, because they do. But don't get me wrong, they just as well could do something else, but they could do something else if they wanted to, but they don't. So basically, anytime I hear especially when they're talking about the demonetization demon, anytime I heard a YouTuber or a streamer whinging about that, I say, well, you could always just quit and just put in an application at your local Home Depot, but you don't want to do that. You want to make a living off of making videos. And I understand that there are some issues, but you can't expect, how sympathetic can you expect me or somebody working at Home Depot to be to that? You can't. You really can't. But that's a tangent. So again, contracting and you, what is a managed service provider, and what like basically what really goes into information technology and scheduling and really the definition of a managed service provider. And because again, like basically they're middlemen doing contracts, and so that the customer or company, at least in the short run, can reduce the cost of having repairs or service done, i.e. regular salary, but also taxes, benefits, HR, whatever else has to go. The customer doesn't have to worry about that. And again, there's a bunch of, and so like I say, because of that, you know, they've kind of signed on for the screwiness that occurs in all of that. But yeah, so that's my conclusion, and I'm just gonna stop this video before I go off on too many other wild tangents. Please don't sue me, game company. Like, well, like whatever. Like, I think they only have that copyright when it refers to when it refers to video gamings. But maybe later on I will just do a rant about copyright, even though I'm not anything of an expert, but I have a lot to say about it. So thank you. Bye.